Dr. Mike Hink is our secretary, and he'll make the introductions and get things rolling. But we thought it would be interesting to do a discussion on e-cigarettes this evening. So hope everybody enjoys it. If you need, the facilities are out the door and around the corner to the left, and there are refreshments in the back if you need a drink or something to snack on.
Okay, we call this a chemistry cafe. We'd like to do this on an annual basis, but we don't always have the manpower to do it. The last chemistry cafe we had a panel of experts comparing bottled water with tap water, and that was very, very interesting. But we'd like the topic to have a chemistry aspect to it. So the water was a natural thing, and the same with e-cigarettes. A lot of chemistry involved. And in trying to prepare for this, I did a lot of research, as have our panel members, and I would say that there's still a lot of information to be collected. So we might want to do this again in a year or two. When there is more, when they've completed more studies. But we do have a lot of information to get out today. I want to thank the panel members. They're volunteering to spend their time here, which we very much appreciate. We have two representing e-cigarettes and two kind of representing concerns about health effects of e-cigarettes. So with that, let me introduce the panel. We've got Rob Reagan, who's owner of Vapor Kings, and helped me recruit someone who can do the presentations for them tonight, and that is Sean Gore. And you can see his title here, Chairman of Oval, and for Petroleum and Land. Oh, good. All right. And then on your left, I guess, Corey Love, who has a master's in public health and is the tobacco prevention and control coordinator for the Tulsa City County Health Department. And he's been working in tobacco cessation for 9 years now. And then Doug Matheny.
Very good.
Okay, thank you. All right, he's chief of the, what is OSDH? Oklahoma State Department of Health.
Retired, actually. You should say retired.
That's all right. Tobacco Use Prevention Service for the last 16 years. I'm sorry about a short introduction here, but maybe you could, is there something you want to add?
No, that's fine.
Okay. All right, now we had to toss a coin to see who goes first, and Sean is going to go first. Now, let me just preface things. I don't know, how many of you saw any sort of notice about this event? Not too many. Okay, well, we want to get facts out as much as possible, and we appreciate that people are giving their time. There are no bad guys here, so we want to hopefully discuss the facts and not get too emotional about any of this. But the intent is to give you, the audience, at least 30 minutes of question and answer time. So we'll try to finish the presentations maybe 7:40, and then open the floor for comments, questions to the panel. And we can go till 8:30, but I don't think anybody wants to stay that long. So, but that's the forum. So with that, I guess we'll start with you, Sean. Oh, and Sean's presentation, there are copies over here. Maybe I'll pass them out.
I passed those out.
Hi, my name is Sean Gore. I am the chairman of the Oklahoma Vapers Advocacy League, or OVAL for short. I'm also the president and CEO for Petroleum Land and Environmental Company, where we handle all regulatory and environmental issues for the oil and gas industry. I am an environmental professional. It's the way the EPA looks at me. So this is kind of a little bit about my background. I'm also the owner of Get Vaped LLC, where we own 3 vape stores in Guthrie, Edmond, and South Oklahoma City. So getting into a little bit about why I'm here or why I care. When I was 5 years old, I grew up in northwest Oklahoma. When I was 5 years old, I started walking around with a snuff can in my back pocket. It was nothing. There was no 18-year-old law to prevent anyone under from 18 from buying tobacco products back then. So it was cool to walk around with a snuff can in your back pocket. You just couldn't get, smoke, or you just want to get cold. But needless to say, by the time I was 12, I watched my grandmother, the lady who raised me for the first 4 years of my life, die of lung cancer. It was a very traumatic experience for me. Moving on, by the time I was 20, I was a smoker. As time gets on, you realize that you're not immortal, and you start getting concerned about your health and going from there. And nicotine addiction and tobacco is a tough habit to break. So needless to say, I tried everything under the sun. I tried the Chantix, the whole 9 yards. I rode bulls for 19 years. That's another story, but to make it relevant, I was judging a bull riding one time. I had a chew in my cheek, a dip in my lip, smoking a cigarette, chewing on the Nicorette gum, puffing on the Nicotrol inhaler with a patch on my back. And I realized something's not working. And it's like, I've got to do something. My wife and I bought the Blues. That's about the time that they'd come out. They just didn't really work for us. We went to Circle K, got the 21st Centuries. Those worked a little bit better, but what people don't realize is smoking, it's not just the chemical or nicotine addiction. It is psychological. It's a physical addiction as well as a chemical addiction. Now, the cigarettes that you get at the Quick Stop, they kind of serve the nicotine addiction as well as the hand-to-mouth. That's going to be your physical addiction. But the psychological addiction is feeling the throat hit and blowing out and seeing the smoke come out. And if it's just not enough, psychologically, you just don't feel like you're getting what you're getting. But needless to say, my brother-in-law handed my wife and I an Ego battery with a closed tank system, and I'd pretty much written it off as snake oil. It's not going to work. But he made me try it. I tried it. We kind of liked it, so we went and each bought a pack of, not a pack, but starter kits. And I had a half a pack of cigarettes left. I was a pack and a half day smoker. It took me 2 days to finish that half a pack of cigarettes. And that's been over 3 years ago, and I've not touched a tobacco product since. These things will work. So that's why I'm here. That's why we feel so passionate about these things. We believed in it so much that we decided to open up a vape shop and help spread the word. Guys, if you're addicted to tobacco products, there's a way out. I promise you there is a way out. So that's kind of why we're here. But moving on, I want to get into a perspective. The perspective of the whole thing is within the 21st century, there's an estimated 1 billion people who are going to die from smoking cigarettes. 1 billion. So while we're sitting back on our haunches wondering how we want to regulate these things, we need to be regulating it as if the 1 billion lives mean the most, instead of the $1 billion. This needs to be about health instead of wealth. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through this slideshow and I'm going to show you the science. And then we're going to move in and I want to connect the dots on how it is about wealth instead of health. And who all's losing if people are switching from the taxed combustible cigarettes, bypassing the pharmaceutical products that only have a 3 to 9% success rate, and going to the untaxed, unregulated e-cigarettes. Number one in the press release, the question was, do e-cigarettes help smokers quit? Undoubtedly, yes. You have a 60% more likely chance to succeed using e-cigarettes, where data shows pharmaceutical cessation products promoted by our health agencies only have a 3 to 9% success rate. That 9% success rate is being generous. It's more like 3 to 5. But right here, the study found that people who wanted to quit smoking were about 60% more likely to succeed if they used e-cigarettes compared to would-be quitters who tried anti-smoking nicotine patch or gum that's promoted by our health agencies. The second question on the press release, are e-cigarettes less of a health risk? Absolutely. I mean, let's look at what cigarettes do here. I mean, smoking causes heart disease, lung cancer, COPD, strokes. 1 out of every 10 individuals is going to die from smoking, and there's 5.4 million lives will be lost every year. That's a lot of lives. You move on down to the vapor. It contains no toxic tar or carbon monoxide. It's not the nicotine that's dangerous. It's all the other 4,000 carcinogens in a cigarette. Nicotine, actually, and I seen the lady nod her head over here. There's a study at Texas. They have found, and I'm not saying that nicotine is good for you, but nicotine is also shown to stimulate the growth of new blood vessels. They're looking at nicotine as being something that can be used for diabetic patients because circulation is a major problem. You'll have a lot less amputees, Alzheimer's, schizophrenia, so on and so forth. So they're looking at it that way. But needless to say, carbon monoxide, Dr. Wagner, you'll see his name come up in some of the slides here later on. He come into, I think, Vapor Kings as well as our store, and we could tell instantly somebody who had smoked a cigarette prior to walking into our store because they blew about 20 parts per million smoker on carbon monoxide. The people who were sitting there vaping and puffed on the monitor after that, they hit the rates of a non-smoker. This is virtually the same. This article, actually, this was a publication just came out 2 days ago by the American Heart Association, one of our opponents here. Is a policy statement from the American Heart Association. E-cigarettes do not generate side stream aerosol. Study showed right here that smokers who wanted to quit without professional help were significantly more likely to report abstinence using e-cigarettes than with traditional cessation aids or going cold turkey. This is probably my favorite one. And like I said, I just threw this in about 4 o'clock this morning. And this was in their policy statement. A small retrospective study of pulmonary function and symptoms in smokers with asthma who switched to e-cigarettes found no adverse effects of e-cigarettes, but rather the e-cigarette users had improved pulmonary function and reduced severity of asthma symptoms. Here's the link, published August 24th online. You're more than welcome to go check it out. And this is, like I say, this is using our opponents' data, and they recognize the safety of e-cigarettes. 2, are e-cigarettes less of a health risk for users? And again, I'm going to use the tobacco control researchers' own data. And we're going to go with the continuum of risk, and the continuum being less dangerous, quitting clean air, to the highest is the most dangerous, going to be combustible tobacco cigarettes. The own tobacco control researchers right here put the continuum of risk of e-cigarettes in the same category as their own nicotine replacement therapies that they promote online and quickly. So if they're in the same continuum of risk, why are we still here having this discussion?
Actually, Sean, they've got it next bill.
Hmm?
Got it next bill.
It's at the bottom of the electronic cigarettes.
Well, yeah, potentially reduced exposure.
Yeah, towards the lower end.
Yeah. But I mean, you look at, I mean, you're clear over here. I mean, it's,
Oh, yeah, it's hard, yeah.
I mean, and
Sorry.
this is using, you all's own data here. Does vaping present a health risk or a health threat to bystanders? Now, we changed this around because the first question was the secondhand smoke from e-cigarettes dangerous for those exposed to these fumes. Number one, there is no smoke created through e-cigarettes. It's a vapor. There has to, in order to have smoke, it has to be combustion, and there is no combustion. So you can also go to this link right here. The Commonwealth of Virginia, the Attorney General also agreed with that statement, and you can go to that link and see what their ruling was on that. But whenever it comes back to the question, does vaping present a health threat to bystanders, there's 2 studies that are my favorite that I like to refer to. The first one is called Peering Through the Mist. It was conducted at Drexel University by Igor Burston, where he reviewed over 9,000 e-cigarette usage cases. And they concluded that the health risks were too low to be of concern for both the puffers and people in their vicinity. Research shows e-cigarettes are vastly safer than smoking and pose no second-hand risk to bystanders. Another one of my favorite is going to be the Clearstream Air Study. It was conducted by Dr. Marcelinos. He works for the Onassis Cardiac Center in Athens, Greece. And in the conclusions, and I quote, went on to say, on the basis of the compounds analyzed, we can determine that it would be more unhealthy to breathe air in big cities compared to staying in the same room with someone who is vaping. Now, we've got smoking bans, and they've largely been justified because of the risk posed to others by environmental tobacco smoke. And that's true. But e-cigarettes do not produce any side stream smoke, and as the American Lung Association says, e-cigarettes do not generate any side stream aerosol either. Some of the other health and safety issues that are going to come up and what people are going with is nicotine poisoning in our children. And I've talked to the poison control and we're in agreement. Come on, parents, be responsible. Once you walk outside the door of a vape shop, it's time to grow up and be responsible. If you're going to procreate, be a parent, be responsible. You don't leave your cleaning supplies out, you don't leave your pharmaceutical supplies out, you keep that stuff away from your children. This is meant for adults. So in order to be a member of OVAL and go from there, you have to sell your product with child safety caps. That's a mandatory. I mean, we can only do so much. But once you walk outside that door, it's time, that parents become responsible. So let's put the blame where the actual blame lies, and that's with parents. So with the poison control, we had a total of 37,770 exposure calls, just under 40,000. Ranking at the top were pharmaceutical products at just under 22,000. Just under 3,000 with household cleaning supplies, cosmetic products, just over 2,700. Lastly, tobacco and nicotine at 287. And of those 287, you had, I'm sorry guys, of those 287, 77 were from e-liquids. Now bear in mind, these are just simply exposure calls. This is not actual poisoning. If you call in and you inquire as to what if my child got into the e-liquids, they're going to chalk that up as an exposure call. We know of, I think there was closely 5 actual contact calls this last year. No serious injuries or deaths, but again, let's put the blame where the blame lies. Parents, please be responsible. Please keep these things out of reach of your children. They're not meant for children, they're meant for adults trying to move away from tobacco products. Another one that's going to come up is gateway. Are these promoting or normalizing smoking, so on and so forth, or are they a gateway to children to get to smoking? Research is not finding e-cigarettes to be a gateway to anything, and I quote, it didn't seem as though it really proved to be a gateway to anything, says Theodore Wagner, PhD Assistant Professor of General and Community Pediatrics at the University of Oklahoma Health and Sciences Center after surveying 1,300 college students. Dr. Wagner is also funded by TSET, the Tobacco Control Settlement Endowment Trust. And again, this is their own research. Another study that came out, Harvard study, e-cigarettes not gateway to smoking. Research showed that, if anything, e-cigarettes are a gateway away from smoking. Dr. Marcelinos chimes in again. He said this study, referring to the Harvard study, verifies that e-cigarette use does not renormalize smoking. So in 2014, more studies have come out showing that e-cigarettes and personal vaporizers are in fact being used successfully as a cessation product. That's a permanent move away from combustible cigarettes. Here is more of their research. See up there, these are tobacco control researchers. Preliminary data suggests that the majority of vape store customers are exclusively e-cigarette users. That means that they are only e-cigarette users and they're not going from e-cigarettes to tobacco. In fact, they're finding that it's the other way around. If you do have dual users, people are they're smokers and they're buying the vaporizers to wean themselves off of the tobacco products. Adult smoking rate declines to a new historic low. Actually, e-cigarettes are projected to overtake the tobacco industry within the decade. About the same time that tobacco products came onto the market, really prevalent in Oklahoma, we've seen a really massive decline in the smoking rate and the calls to the quit line. They don't know why, they're saying. but it doesn't take a rocket scientist. Smoking rates are down, quit line calls are down, e-cigarette sales are up. One can fairly deduce e-cigarettes play a large role in helping reduce smoking. Now this is us here, but the rest of this information on the page is the source from Tobacco Settlement Endowment Trust. So now that we've presented the science, let's get into the disruptive technology. E-cigarettes are the disruptive technology to the tobacco industry. Now the tobacco industry is not just big tobacco. It's not. The tobacco industry is the tobacco companies whose obvious role is to sell their product and make money. But the biggest player in this is the government with your excise tax. Now you have a 60% ad valorem rate on the sale of each pack of cigarettes. And in Oklahoma last year alone, there was 14 million pure tax stamps sold in this state alone. So let's just make the math easy and say each pack of cigarette costs $6. So 60% is $3.60 of that $6 goes to the government for taxes. So $3.60 times 14 million is $50,400,000 in lost revenue. So you can see why they want to tax and regulate e-cigarettes. There's a lot of money to be lost. The next player in it is your pharmaceutical companies. They profit from repeat sales, largely ineffective smoking cessation products, nicotine replacement therapies such as Zyban, Chantix. They partner with public health to push bans and simultaneously promote pharmaceutical products. The next one is going to be your tobacco control. They work closely with big pharmaceutical and governments, selling policy advice to government, agitating for taxes, bans which benefit both. There's a huge conflict of interest in this whole thing right here. A huge conflict of interest. So e-cigarettes, they threaten the established tobacco industry as a whole. There's a little graph, but we'll go on to my friend Jonathan Small at the Oklahoma Council for Public Affairs. They are actually backing Oval on this deal. He quotes, and this actual quote is in the handouts that you guys received here, said, given this significant source of revenue to the state bureaucrats attempting to regulate e-cigarettes and other combustible tobacco alternatives have a direct conflict of interest. Also, my quote, e-cigarettes are without a doubt the largest step forward in tobacco harm reduction we've seen in the last 50 years. This really needs to be about health instead of wealth. Another thing that's going to pop up is flavors. We are not targeting minors with flavors. Oval helped write the bill, the youth prevention bill that goes into effect in November, Senate Bill 1602. One of the main things that we wanted in our bill when it come down to it is it should be unlawful for anyone under the age of 18 to purchase or possess any vapor products that may or may not contain nicotine. And our opposition just simply said ones that contain nicotine. So that's a big deal for us. We're not targeting with flavors. Actually, there's studies out there showing that flavors have a big impact on a person's success and truly moving away from tobacco products. But let's just take this in perspective here. If we're targeting minors, is not the wine and spirits companies targeting minors? I mean, you've got cherry cola, whipped cream, marshmallow puff, tutti frutti, orange dream, grape lollipop vodka, and then you have our own pharmaceutical products promoted by our tobacco control industries. And you've got cherry, you've got fruit chill, and you've got peppermint. Now, just for effect, I actually took this out of our drawer last night. This is my 3-year-old daughter's training toothpaste, Orgeal. What is it, pony something? Anybody know what that is, little pony? My little pony. And I put the back side, the ingredients up there, and if you will look at the number 3 ingredient, the number 4 ingredient, and the number 7 ingredient, propylene glycol, glycerin, and flavor. Those are the 3 of the 4 main ingredients in e-cigarettes. And my daughter's training toothpaste. So it gets back to the 1 billion deaths. We need to be regulating these things as if the 1 billion lives mean the most instead of the $1 billion. That's the big connection here. It's not, you know, the science, we've proved the science, but I mean, even with anything, anything can be presented in such a way as to appear sinister through propaganda. I mean, let's take water, for example. You know, these are some of the facts about water. They're kind of blurry, but, you know, the last one here is my favorite. It's that 100% of all people exposed to water will die. I mean, you know, it's how you present it. So, I mean, we can turn it around and go from there. But And again, I'll repeat this. E-cigarettes are undoubtedly the largest step forward in tobacco harm reduction we've seen in the last 50 years. The tobacco laws have been out there to punish people from using product that's going to harm others around them as well as themselves. The tobacco laws were not set up for e-cigarettes, so we need to step back and really look at what we're trying to do here. Is this about wealth or is it about health? And it needs to be about health. With that being said, you can go to ovalok.org, resources and downloads. A lot of the studies are up there, even more. I'll just leave these up here for you. Actually, there's others on cardiac cells, arteries, so on and so forth. So with that, I will pass the floor.
Is that in the handout?
No, that's actually the consideration that Jonathan Small put, but if you want to go, I'll take it back. Right there's our website, and just click over on the resources and downloads, and it's going to take you to all of it right there. Go to the Oval Public Health Advisory, and that's where you're going to see those links.
Okay.
So.
All right, thank you. I've given a lot of thought to this, and I'd like to hold off critiquing the presentation until both sides are presented and we get some questions going. And then you may have some comments on what they presented, and they may have some comments on, but I want to hold off on that for a little while to give the audience a chance to jump in, and then I will give you time, both sides, to say, oh, you know, I'm not sure I agree with what you presented, but okay, let's see if I can find your presentation here.
Should be at the bottom there.
Sean brought this neat little gadget for advancing some of the trial work.
If you just hit that whenever you get your just hit this play button right here. Now all you have to do is just hit these two.
All right, I think this is yours. I don't want to end up with it. Okay, thank you.
Thanks for this opportunity, and I thought Sean did a good job in advocacy from that position. And actually, you know, I noticed in the press release for this event that it was talked about the pro versus and the con, you know, about e-cigarettes. I don't know if everything is about pro and con. Things are quite that black and white. In a token to that effect, I titled this presentation "Opportunities for Common Ground," trying to kind of dispel the big debate a little bit. Because I think a lot of what Sean referred to is really more national level stuff going on than it is going on in Oklahoma. You know, obviously, Sean and I have been on the same side, but have been on opposite side on policy issues at the Capitol. And I don't really know about Dan, but I know that Sean and I sometimes work together at the Capitol on some of these issues, taking on big tobacco and some of their initiatives at the Capitol. So how did I get into this? My background at the State Health Department was in tobacco prevention. So all that traditional stuff that Sean talked about, all the efforts to help people quit and from the #1 preventable cause of death. So again, we got that in common right off the bat. But after I retired, I got into doing something I couldn't do when I was a state employee. I started trying to cause trouble at the Capitol. In particular, exposing tobacco industry influence at the state capitol. When I say tobacco industry, I'm talking about big tobacco, the big tobacco companies, Philip Morris, R.J. Reynolds, Lorillard. That's the first time I've ever been included on the slide, and possibly including in the definition of the tobacco industry. But I got the point, though, I think. So that's my website, tobaccomoney.com, and. Again, that bill, that bad R.J. Reynolds bill at the Capitol that everybody was fighting in 2013, a lot of folks were using this website to help fight that bill. I was really pleased. I went to a rally on the Capitol grounds against the R.J. Reynolds bill that was about e-cigarettes, but it was just written from R.J. Reynolds' perspective. R.J. Reynolds just wanted to sell R.J. Reynolds e-cigarettes. They wrote proprietary language that would have put the vapors out of business. And so I actually went to a rally out there, and people were saying, yeah, that Senator Rob Johnson, he takes all that tobacco money. I said, where did you learn that? He said, tobaccomoney.com. And I go, yes! Because that's kind of my deal. And so we were walking the halls together. So this is the history of that R.J. Reynolds bill and all those efforts there. But there came a point after a lot of, and there was a lot of money, by the way, in there, and this bill did receive a whole lot of favors. In fact, after that bill died, on the day of that rally, they resurrected another bill that came up in the Senate like a week later. But somewhere in that point, somewhere along there, about May 1st, 2013, R.J. Reynolds managed to pull off a deal with CASAW, the Consumer Advocates for Smoke-Free Alternatives, where they were basically, CASAW said, which kind of represented the vapor industry in the negotiations or the discussions, where basically they took out everything that CASAW and the vaping stores found objectionable. But there were still things in it that I found objectionable. There were still things in there that had to do with cutting all taxes on snus, saying that snus, even though it's made of tobacco, isn't a tobacco product. A lot of things, saying that there shall be no tax on e-cigarettes. Now, I don't want a tax on e-cigarettes. There won't be an effort, and I've told, as Sean knows, dozens of legislators this. I don't think there will ever be an effort in Oklahoma to raise taxes on e-cigarettes. I think that that's more of a national issue. It's not going to happen in Oklahoma because the only way that you can raise taxes in Oklahoma on any product per state question 692 back in whenever that was, in 1990, whenever that was, it said you can't raise taxes unless you get a vote of people. And I think only one tax increase has happened in Oklahoma since then, and it was the 2004 tax increase on cigarettes. But to prioritize e-cigarettes, I mean, I would go after combustible cigarettes because that's what's killing people. So I don't think it'll ever happen. So this bill was kind of a Trojan horse bill, even after they took some bad stuff out that would have put vapor stores out of business. So anyway, this is a listing of some of those things I was just citing real quickly. Don't have time to go into all that, obviously, but anyways, as Sean mentioned, the end result of that effort, actually not until April of 2014, the next year, because the R.J. Reynolds bill, the first R.J. Reynolds bill finally died on the House floor. But the next year they came back, and in this case we were on opposite sides of it, but we negotiated. I mean, we really worked with the legislator, both giving our respective opinions, and it ended up kind of being in the middle. The tax bill went away because we didn't need it, but the youth access bill stayed there, but they didn't get to say that it's not a tobacco product. The big contention there was that this is in the context of FDA about to regulate them as a tobacco product, and it didn't feel like we would have been the first state, or among the first states. We believed for a long time we would have been the first state. I think it ended up being somewhere around a handful of states, like 5, maybe at the most, that have said that e-cigarettes are not a tobacco product, because there were only 2 ways that FDA could regulate these products. They could regulate them as cessation products or as tobacco products. When they initially said they're going to be cessation products, the e-cigarette industry fought them, or at least one particular company did, and they won in court. FDA was disallowed from calling them cessation products. And they were told that they can regulate them as tobacco products. And so we all knew it was inevitable they would be regulating them as tobacco products, and those regulations were expected to come out any time, and they didn't come out until finally April 24th, just right after the bill got resolved at the state capitol, even before it was signed with the governor. The FDA, between the legislature and the governor's signature, FDA finally came out after about a 3-year wait and did propose regulations on e-cigarettes as tobacco products. So they are considered, under federal law, they are, the FDA clearly has the authority to regulate them as tobacco products, and they have proposed that they were going to do that. So here's a chart that we all look at. This Ted Wagner worked this up as kind of a mock-up. Dr. Ted Wagner that Sean referred to, and he's really a good, honest guy that just takes it right down the middle and just calls the facts. And so, you know, I could cite some things about his concerns about formaldehyde in e-cigarettes, because e-cigarettes are not all the same. It's a constantly changing industry. So there are those, what Sean referred to as cig-alikes, the one that looked like cigarettes. The Enjoy was the first product out there, and those and the big tobacco companies tend to be in the cig-alike business. And then there's the vapor stores. And the vapor store is really a different product. And even among that, there's a lot of differences. And what temperature the liquid is vaporized at. And actually, I think technically, this is a chemical society, I'll straighten it out, but I understand that it's not a vapor, it's actually an aerosol. So a vapor is just kind of a neat term to refer to it, but it turns into an aerosol. And that some of this aerosol is going to have different chemical composition. The bottom line is that they are obviously much, much, much safer than combustible cigarettes. There is no question about that. I think the only reason why you don't see you know, just a flat-out endorsement of these products is because the public health world tends to work within, you know, like with FDA and like waiting for the science to come out. This is such a rapidly moving field that it's like, you know, when did they first appear in the U.S.? Was it 2007, Sean? Something like that?
Earlier than that,
Yeah.
2005, 2006.
Yeah. But the first time I ever saw an e-cigarette in Oklahoma was at Penn Square Mall. They had a little kiosk in Oklahoma City, a little kiosk, and that was probably about 2008 or something like that. And they were just there, and I went up, you know, like around the Christmas time, I went up and asked them, and you know, who they sold them to, and they were saying, well, it's mainly people that want to quit. You know, it's like people buying it, people trying to quit and stuff. And it was like, I wasn't going to say, in my position with the health department, I wasn't going to say anything negative about e-cigarettes. It was kind of like, well, you know, whatever. It's kind of interesting technology. You know, it's kind of like, we'll see where this goes. You know, and then vapor stores came out, and it is like taken off. Oklahoma was recently featured in a New York Times article, a very lengthy article that highlighted Oklahoma as having a disproportionate share of vapor. It seems to be the front line for the vapor industry for some reason. I don't know if maybe it's because we've created such a demand in Oklahoma for trying to quit, because people are trying to quit, so they see this as another way to try to quit. So and we have a lot of smokers in the first place and a high demand to quit. So anyway, it's doing very well here. And I keep telling Sean that it really is going to keep doing well. I'm very confident. Don't I tell you that every time I see you? You're doing great. I mean, there's really no threat to e-cigarettes in Oklahoma. You know, the FDA regulation obviously is the concern. Is the regulation going to be written in such a way that it favors big tobacco products or the mom and pop vapor stores, or both, or you know, you know, I've heard complaints. I'm not an expert on the proposed regulations, but I've heard complaints from vapor store owners and advocates who have said that that FDA is requiring every single individual product to be tested. And so if you have different flavors and different concentrations and every single thing, and you have to pay an application fee for every single one of these different 100 products that you might sell, you know, and they say, we can't do that. But big tobacco can afford to do that, but we can't afford to do that, so it's going to favor them. And so in my opinion, that sounds like the R.J. Reynolds bill. It's not a very good idea. But I don't think that's going to end up happening, because I think the vapor industry has evolved to the point that they are very good advocates, very good, and they got their comments in. The FDA, you know, if that's really exactly what the FDA was trying to do, then I don't think they're going to end up doing that. But I think a lot of the other FDA regulations are really great. They're going to propose regulations I think it's going to help the industry. To have consumers know what they're getting, to know exactly what they're buying, no matter who they buy it from. They know that it's a safer, that it's actually got some standards. Right now, there's no regulation at all. Again, so it's kind of hard for public health to embrace it, because you don't even know what they're selling. It's not regulated. You don't even know what's there. And then marketing, as I'll get into. But anyway, this is what we're going to end up with, in my opinion, with FDA regulation. We're going to end up with a continuum of risk. I don't know if this is going to happen in 2 years or 5 years or 10 years. This is not from the FDA. This is from Ted Wagoner's head. But Ted Wagoner is projecting what he has seen FDA, the director of the FDA Center for Tobacco Products talks about doing. And it's called the continuum of risk, where once these things are regulated and that all these tobacco products, to include e-cigarettes, are tested, and the manufacturing standards are established, they're able to say, yes, it's a continuum. It'll look different from this. It might have 30 points on there, but it'll have, exactly. And e-cigarettes are going to be down towards the nicotine patches, and combustible cigarettes are the most dangerous thing on the other end. I think that's where we're going to be. So these are the Cig-a-lights. I'm just going to go through these real quickly in case you haven't seen them. And this is more like one of the hundreds of products sold at vapor stores. And then, of course, there are all the flavors, and you could really get into quite a collection of different flavors. And this is just a picture I found to kind of illustrate. There's a lot of different pieces that if a person really gets into this that you can buy from the vapor store. Big tobacco has really moved into it now. They're still primarily focused on combustible cigarettes, but they are making sure to protect their market share. They're seeing the bandwagon. They're jumping into e-cigarettes. So RJ, and then it's just always changing. Just this summer, RJ Reynolds bought Lorillard, the #2 cigarette company in America, bought the #3 cigarette company in America, and the #3 cigarette company had already bought Blue, a real big e-cigarette. Cig-a-light looking product, but in this deal they got rid of Blue and they sold it to Imperial Group Tobacco from Great Britain, which is the second leading cigarette manufacturer in the world after China Tobacco. So they're not an American company. And then Philip Morris had already bought Green Smoke, and this summer they bought Nico Cig, which is out of UK as well. So it's just always changing, but the big tobacco companies are definitely getting into this in a big way. The advertising looks like big tobacco companies sometimes. This is a little slide, shows a few slides from it that was put together by the Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids that shows how how similar some of the ads that have come out for e-cigarettes and the marketing of it are to traditional tobacco ads. The Camel, these are Blue ads. They've done a lot of advertising. Again, Blue formerly owned by Lorillard. On the left is e-cigarettes, on the right, vintage cigarette ad. Marlboro versus Blue, kind of the macho man look. On the right is the Virginia Slims, left is Blue. Lot of different ads on this theme, romantic, and again the flavors, as Sean mentioned. Sponsoring special events, they're really taking a lesson from big tobacco in learning how to market these events in ways that are attractive to young people. Sponsoring race cars. You can't, Marlboro isn't allowed to sponsor race cars anymore, but Blue, Green Smoke certainly can. So how do we reduce appeal to youth? Well, I believe that one of the important things that FDA can do is regulate marketing of the products. I think that ads should be, when it comes to products that we know are addictive, and nicotine, Sean won't argue with this, I don't think, that nicotine has been shown, besides its effects on the cardiovascular system on adults, it's not entirely harmless, but for kids it's particularly harmful. That there is, it seems to be a common knowledge about particularly the brain development in adolescence. The nicotine has an effect on that. So anyway, nobody argues that e-cigarettes should not be used by kids. Nobody wants kids to start using them. Well, we know that when you have ads that make things appear to be sexy and the trendy thing, and you're selling something that's really cool like paraphernalia, and it's just, then you're going to have that some uptake on the youth. And that's also shown the Heart Association report from yesterday. That the lead from the Heart Association report yesterday morning on the Today Show was all about the new numbers on the CDC showing that 7% of adolescents are now using e-cigarettes, and that's gone up a lot in recent years. So how can we reduce it? I think one of the most important things that we can do is to include e-cigarettes in tobacco-free policies. So this might, just bear with me on this for a minute. Sean talked about smoke-free policies, about secondhand smoke. Well, indoors, yeah, that's a real issue. Obviously, secondhand smoke is a real issue, but there's also other benefits, obviously, from not the tobacco industry has taught us about over the years as we've worked to try to get smoke-free environments in restaurants and public places, workplaces. They've bought it because they know that changes social norms. They know that it changes the perception among young people about what's normal in our society. You ask young people how many adults smoke. Years ago, when you would ask them that question, when everybody was smoking everywhere, they thought everybody smoked. And so it really does change things when you put restrictions on where it can be used, besides the secondhand smoke issue. The other thing, well, so anyway, I'll go through these one at a time. I just got 4 points on this. It provides tobacco-free policies that are outdoors and indoors, not just outdoors. Again, it's not just indoors. It's not just about secondhand smoke, but outdoors too. And you have hundreds of businesses going tobacco-free on all of their properties, indoors and outdoors. You have 250 school districts in Oklahoma that have done that. You have 50 hospitals that have done that. The state of Oklahoma has gone tobacco-free on all state-owned buildings. A lot of cities have done it on their city-owned property. And it's not just about secondhand smoke. It provides a clear, consistent message that nicotine addiction is unhealthy and not the norm for adults in the community. It promotes positive adult role modeling, which influences children's beliefs, values, perceptions, and ideals. And I'll just respond to Sean about parental responsibility. I think that parents appreciate the help. I think that obviously parents do have the primary responsibility for their children, but I think parents appreciate it when the messages are consistent throughout the community. Because you're trying to teach your kid not to do something, and then in the society, they're really learning something entirely different. Support, these numbers are off, sorry. Support and reinforce prevention messages delivered in the home and classroom while helping to counteract the growing volume of e-cigarette advertising targeting young people. And finally, well, those numbers are way off, sorry. This is supposed to be number 4. But this is a really important point. Reducing cues to use nicotine among those who want to quit and help to create an environment that's supportive of a nicotine-free lifestyle. Most e-cigarette users are trying to quit nicotine altogether. I think that's when you have people that are going from combustible cigarettes to e-cigarettes, they're envisioning the day when they're no longer using e-cigarettes either. I don't think they necessarily are switching over for a lifetime. And so another big plus about tobacco-free environments is that it's creating an environment conducive to quitting, supporting those quit attempts of being entirely nicotine-free. So, what are the opportunities for common ground? First off, public health officials need to raise public awareness that e-cigarettes are much safer than smoking. And I think that that is happening more and more. You see it in the Heart Association, where they're more proactively going after that. When the FDA continuum of risk starts taking shape, or when you start getting, science and regulation, science on the manufacturer products, the consistency of the manufacturer, and the safety of these products, you'll see more embracing of e-cigarettes, I think, for the public health community. Though, again, they're not going to be allowed, apparently, to be promoted as cessation products. They're not, because of the federal court case that said, no, they can be regulated as tobacco, but not as cessation, so they can't be referred to as cessation products. So it's kind of a tough thing to work around here. But, and then, of course, we would ask that the vapor stores would promote complete cessation. I think that most do, many do. Discouraging recreational use or dual use. If you don't actually quit smoking combustible cigarettes, then how much is your risk really being reduced? In fact, you can end up being more addicted than you were before. My sister-in-law recently reported to me that she was using, who smokes, who reported that she was using e-cigarettes just when she couldn't smoke. And so she was actually she was not reducing her cigarette smoking, she was just adding e-cigarettes to what she was already doing. Support ongoing efforts to accelerate the decline of combustible cigarettes. This is the key. If we all work together to knock out combustible cigarettes, including raising taxes on combustible cigarettes, including doing everything we can do to attack big tobacco and their efforts to promote combustible cigarettes, then e-cigarettes have much better benefit for public health in our country, as if we could simultaneously reduce combustible cigarettes. But on the other hand, if the vapor stores and e-cigarette sellers tend to distance themselves from public health and align themselves with big tobacco and use some of their same arguments that we shouldn't have government involved, we shouldn't have any regulation, we shouldn't have taxes, we shouldn't have anything on combustible cigarettes either, then that's actually counterproductive for health, because the only way that we really come out ahead is we got to knock combustible cigarettes down. Support 100% tobacco-free policies at workplaces and other places to include e-cigarettes as a tobacco product in those policies. And support reasonable manufacturing and marketing standards. I put the word reasonable in there. I already gave you examples. Something I don't think is probably reasonable. from what I understand about every different product, 100 different products having to have pay a $15,000, something like that.
Well, it could be 100,000 or more per product.
Yeah, per product. That doesn't sound reasonable to me. But obviously there are other things like the standardization of the manufacturing standards. So that was what I had. I just wanted to kind of close with one thing, and that's just kind of to defend the efforts, the traditional efforts for reducing smoking. These policies, the smoke-free policies and tobacco-free policies, and the taxes on combustible cigarettes, combined with effective programs like the Oklahoma Tobacco Helpline that Corey's worked with for 8 years, and the community-based programs. All these things have led to tremendous declines in these products. The most reliable, accurate way of looking at how much cigarettes are used in Oklahoma are the consumption figures. These are the tax commission figures that Sean referred to, that you get data from the tax commission. How many cigarettes are actually sold in Oklahoma based on the tax stamps? That's much more reliable than looking at the prevalence numbers, because the prevalence is based on a phone survey. And the phone survey is a plus or minus, obviously, margin of error. And also, it only measures if you smoke at all and how much you smoke. But the consumption figures actually look at the number of cigarettes sold. So the high point in Oklahoma was 1982, 147 packs per person in Oklahoma, not per smoker, per person, 147 packs per capita in fiscal year 1982. In 2010, that number had dropped. And this is, I think, before, it'd be safe to say 2010 is before the onset of a lot of vapor stores appearing in Oklahoma. Okay. So and all you have are those kiosks at the mall, basically.
And online.
Yeah. So at that point, we were down to 71. So we cut it more than half. The youth tobacco use had also dropped more than half. From 1999, the first numbers we have for youth, it's just a survey, but it had gone to half. But Sean's right, for adult prevalence, the high point was 28.7, and that was in 2001. That's probably the most reliable, because that, again, surveys are not all that accurate, the methodology changes, but if you look at 2001, and now we're at 23.3. But if you look at the number of people that now smoke some days instead of every day, and these other, when you dig a little bit deeper, you see that number is actually better than it sounds. That is, have you smoked 100 cigarettes in your lifetime, and do you smoke now? 23.3% still say yes. So I just want to point out the consumption figures are the best measure, really. It's the most sensitive measure of what's going on in Oklahoma. So what's happened since 2010 on consumption numbers? That number went from, which I think is just getting right to the heart of the issue, if you don't mind me saying this real quickly. So again, the high was 147 packs in 1987. In 2010, it was 71.2. In 2011, it was 71.0. In 2012, it was 71.3. And in 2013, it was 67. But next year, it may have a significant drop, because it looks like the tax commission numbers for the raw numbers of tax stamps sold, we don't have a per capita number yet. That comes out the year later. It's a process. At the national level, they calculate for all 50 states. The tax commission numbers are down considerably. So this might be the first time you're really able to say, hey, wow, this, but it's really hard to say exactly what caused how much of the reduction. It's like we had that problem with the tax increase. How can we prove how much of that was because of the tax increase and how much was because of the helpline? But I think something's going on too. I think the movement's definitely there. Thank you.
All right, well, I failed in my attempt to open the floor at 7:40, but please ask your questions for the panel. Oh, I'm sorry. I guess I can. All right, go ahead.
I have a question about dual use, and I'm coming from the position of being a hopeless lifelong smoker that did convert 100% to e-cigarettes. And it is almost viewed as an additive effect. So you don't want to be smoking and taking in more nicotine on top of it. But in my experience, I don't see how that can happen, because you said your sister, she used the vapor when she couldn't smoke. Well, the thing is, as a smoker, there are places where it wasn't easy for me to smoke, and that's what got me to using e-cigarettes. I could have smoked, like I could have ran out of the airport, and I've done that, smoked a cigarette, ran back. But for every time I vaped, that was one cigarette I didn't smoke, because you have a certain tolerance for nicotine, and you're not gonna smoke the same amount of cigarettes and then vape on top of it, you'll barf. I mean, so dual use, in my experience, is not additional use. For every time you vape, you smoke less cigarettes. So, I mean, that could be looked at as, that's one more cigarette not smoked, you know what I mean? I don't, is there any cases where it is an additive effect?
Well, everybody at this table knows, and many people in the audience know, that the science isn't clear. That's part of what we're trying to pin down, is what is the net public health benefit exactly? Obviously, there is potential public health benefit, but how can you maximize that benefit by discouraging dual use? And it's probably every possible gradient of benefit for just about every different person that uses it. Everything from the first time I picked up an e-cigarette, I never smoked again, and then I quit e-cigarettes a month later, went right down the nicotine scale, and boy, I'm just done. It was great. To on the other end, well, now, like Sean was saying, now I've got the patch, and I've got the lozenge, and I've got e-cigarettes that I've got. I mean, it's probably everything in between.
Okay. Go ahead.
What do you say to vapor companies such as, whether it be Blue, Enjoy, all the way to like the Vapor Shark? Chris Kringle, obviously, I believe that was a big flub on their part to use Santa Claus as a advertising effect, but still being able to advertise along the lines of, say, Nicorette gum, only without the cessation wording. You know what I mean? Not necessarily saying, well, this is safer than cigarettes, but still being able to advertise in that, albeit a bland, very direct, straightforward approach, but still being able to keep that advertising going versus, oh, I'm Mr. Joe Cool sitting on a couch in a bar smoking or vaping on a Blue.
Somebody else want to answer?
It's what Chancellor, whenever that came out about the advertising, we ran the demographics. I can't remember what two main stations they were talking about. The demographics for those two stations, one of them was, it's not MTV, but what's another one of those?
Adult Swim or something.
Yeah, it was, the demographics between that was between 18 and 54. So it wasn't that he was actually marketing to children. I mean, these aren't adult children channels that little kids should be advertising on. Now, I mean, if you've seen e-cigarette commercials pop up on the Cartoon Network, yeah, we're going to have a problem. That's not an appropriate place to be advertising. But when you've got a demographics between 18 and 54, that shouldn't be a problem, and these things should be promoted, not demonized in that area. So, and go at that. And again, it falls back to parenting. Parents, monitor what your children are watching. Well, let's quit blaming something other than where the actual blame lies. And this is supposed to be about individual rights, not societal rights, as set up in the Constitution. So parents are going to have to take some responsibility.
And I'll add to the first part of your question too, on the health claims. The minute we say it's better than smoking, we're making a health claim, and we can't do that because FDA automatically pulls us right over into the
right. I'm just saying, as far as like obviously for public health advocates versus vaping advocates, you've got public health advocates on one side saying, okay, well, just like his presentation, here's an ad for Pall Mall, here's an ad for Vapor Company A. They look the exact same. Right. Whereas, would it be a better common ground, like he was talking about, if for some reason they are regulated that way as far as advertising goes, to bring it down to just like the Nicorette gum ad, where it's a color background, it's plain, precise, and to the point. You're not showing anyone doing anything. You're just showing this is what the product is, this is what it does, here's where you can get it. Would that be a decent common ground as far as coming from, they say this advertising goes to kids, whereas they say this is my business, you shouldn't be able to tell me how to advertise because these people should be taking care of themselves.
Well, and I could just say that there's all different degrees of advertising restrictions,
right.
And all the advertising restrictions are always tested in the Supreme Court. They always go up there against the freedom of speech issue.
Right.
So it's quite a dicey area to get into. But they proposed, for instance, requiring the cigarette companies to have to use black and white advertising only and stuff like that. You know, even for what they're still allowed to do, they're not on radio, TV, already even print. You know, and their packaging. So there's another whole gradient potentially for these cigarettes.
Why don't they go after alcohol then on the same note?
Yeah, I was shocked when alcohol, when the liquor started being advertised on TV again about 5 years ago. I couldn't believe it.
I mean, the vodka commercials are outrageous.
I know.
And there's so many of them. I mean, there's more alcohol commercials than there is any other commercials out there.
Because there's no alternative to alcohol.
Yes, coming from a non-smoker, non-tobacco user side and a chemist side, you mentioned about the ingredients in some of the fluids and how they come out of the e-cigarette, or I'm not exactly sure what you call the vaping item. They come out, you're saying they come out as an aerosol rather than an actual vapor.
They come,
So in order to do that, they have not been through an elevated temperature where they've been turned into a steam or a vapor, and they're coming out in droplets of their native form. Is that correct?
correct, and that's from the unit into the person. Now, on the exhale, as you've seen in the American Lung Association, there is no side stream aerosol. So when they're talking about the aerosol being blown back out, that's not affecting anybody. That's the passive vaping issue, or the side stream aerosol is not a factor in this, and that's where we was referring to those studies, is there's no risk to human health.
How is the mist produced by the e-cigarette? What mechanism is at play that turns that liquid into a mist?
It's through the vaporization of the coils inside. It's a heat product, and when it gets to a certain temperature, it starts to turn into the vapor or the small minute particles.
Well,
Exactly.
So there's a heating of the liquid, and it turns into a vapor or an aerosol.
Correct.
Okay.
I have to say, Sean, that in my research for this, I did find articles about the combustion products from the heating of the vapors. And it's not just the propylene glycol, there are other products.
Right, and that's why we're talking, Doug had talked about, manufacturing standards, so on and so forth, and that's one thing that we're looking at now, is to go in from bottling, labeling, and manufacturing standards. There only needs to be 4 ingredients. That's it. 4 ingredients: propylene glycol, vegetable glycerin, US food grade flavoring, and nicotine, if that person so desires to have that in it, and nothing else.
But when it goes through the heating, there is.
Are you talking about the metal from the coils?
Yeah, it creates heat and there is some combustion. Now, how much, we need more studies
There's
on
no
that.
fire
Combustion is fire,
involved.
and if you look at a lot of the legal precedents, and you could like say that the study that I showed with the Commonwealth, the Attorney General, under the legal term of combustion or smoke, there has to be a combustion, and they, most of the studies have deduced that there is no combustion with e-cigarettes.
Well, I can show you an article
Yeah.
offline, but smoke implies particulate rather than compared to a vapor. So there's a distinct chemical difference between smoke and a combustion product.
One thing we got to look at too is, anything you come in contact with is going to have toxicants in it. Too much of anything is a bad thing. And one thing that I found with e-cigarettes is the levels are so minute, they're actually barely detectable. So there is no risk to human health through this. And these are peer-reviewed, published studies.
Yeah, I think most of us here wonder how much nicotine am I being exposed to if I'm next to somebody who's vaping.
Well, yeah.
And I'm not sure I've seen very definitive studies yet.
But you're actually being exposed to nicotine when you eat potatoes or eggplant or so on and so forth as well. Any plant with nightshade has nicotine in it.
Well,
The studies that came out about the nicotine exposure, because you're not exposed to tar or carbon monoxide, but there is some nicotine that is released in it. And I'm not a real math person. And so one of the professors broke it down. And essentially it was, you'd have to be in a smallish room, like a bar or something, that was really tightly closed for a matter of days for you to be exposed to the amount of nicotine in one cigarette. So it was a minor amount of nicotine, nothing that casual contact would have hurt anybody, as I understood it.
Another question back there.
Are there any studies out, and I apologize, I should have probably looked some of it up myself, but are there any studies out showing what products do come out in the vapor or the aerosol for even the smoker that, you know, that's being inhaled? Is there any studies that are showing what chemicals or products or materials are coming out of the vaping item?
There are some studies. Part of the problem is those studies can be skewed one way or another because it depends on what's in the e-liquid. And there's millions of different e-liquids out there, not millions, but thousands of different flavors. You don't know what's in those.
So from that standpoint, would you gentlemen from the vapor side be advocating that we ought to have some kind of manufacturing standards so that, just like you said, Sean,
Absolutely.
so that there are only 4 ingredients and that's all that we have to be concerned about?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Most definitely.
There's also an issue, some of the tests have been done incorrectly, as Dr. Konstantinos Varsalinos has found. If the device is not in the right direction when it's tested, you can do what's dry burn phenomenon, where you're going to get those toxic metals in that vapor. There's just so many different ways the tests can be done. If they're not done correctly, you're going to get incorrect results.
Can we agree that nicotine is addictive?
Yes.
Yes.
Just for the audience. And I was struck by an advertisement in Car and Driver for, I think it was Mark cigarettes?
Mark 10.
E-cigarettes. Is it M-A-R-K?
Yep.
And they have a disclaimer at the bottom, and it says that nicotine is toxic. So that's from an e-cigarette manufacturer.
Water can be toxic.
Exactly. You know, water can be toxic. I mean, if you're talking about pure undiluted nicotine, 100% nicotine, absolutely.
Well, how about in a refill container?
No.
The amount, the concentration there is not toxic.
I mean, you're to the highest of what you're going to get around here is going to be about 3.6% nicotine.
3% of the total volume of the bottle?
Yes.
Yep, exactly.
Not 100%?
No. No, and studies showing between 50 and 60 milligrams of nicotine through oral ingestion can be harmful to an adult. Now, you're not going to get anywhere near close to that through inhalation, and that's why you stop at the 3.6%.
50 to 60 milligrams is toxic
Through oral ingestion.
to drinking it.
Then you're going to get less of that through inhalation, and you don't
And how
see
much
the
is in
3.6%.
that size of a bottle? How many milligrams?
Well, if you have a 5 milliliter bottle and you put a 24 milligram or 2.4% base in it, then you're looking at overall. By the time you add the flavor to that, that's going to be reduced from the 2.4% to probably somewhere actually below 2%.
So not enough if I drink it?
I wouldn't recommend it. But,
Okay,
you know,
might make me
I mean,
sick.
Well, but there are concerns about children ingesting an entire container of refill.
And we fully support child-proof caps, but in the end of it, it is up to the parent to keep that product out of that child's reach.
Well, where I'm trying to go here is kind of answer her question. Is there enough in there to put a child at risk?
What is your definition of risk? You talking about vomiting or near death or?
Yeah, enough to go to the emergency.
With
Not call, but
With poison control, the worst one, they went to the emergency room, the child was ill, and went home that night.
How much did they ingest?
I did not ask on that.
But it was from e-liquid. So kids shouldn't drink it.
Nobody should. Nobody
Okay,
should.
thanks.
But like I say, again, we want to stress this, that it's a parenting issue.
You don't know the age of the child and the weight?
I can't remember off the top of my head. I did at one point in time, but I just took the main numbers right there, but I can find out.
How many calls were there to poison control about e-liquids?
77. And those were exposure calls.
Don't you have that data on calls to the emergency room?
I don't have it on me right away, but he showed some of the data to it. And also, a kid doesn't have to drink it, if I'm correct. They can actually, it's permissible through the skin, nicotine.
It is.
So
It's
they don't have to drink it, but it can just get on them. And the fact of opening it up and it can be exposed that way.
And that's why, we're, with the regulations that we want to put in place, is nobody can get anything over 3.6%. That is as high as you need to go. You don't need to go any higher, and the manufacturers are going to be handling the pure nicotine, but no consumer is going to be able to use that.
I do have a printout of an article about calls to emergency rooms, strictly based on nicotine. And there were like 215 a month compared to less than 50.
Now, are you talking nicotine, or are you talking snuff, cigarettes,
No.
snus, e-liquids?
Well, it was nicotine overexposure, and half of those calls were for children under 5. So there's a potential for a problem.
Well, absolutely, and we recognize it, and that's why, it's important that, whenever they come into the vape stores, one of the things we stress, put your stuff up. This is not meant for children. This is meant for adults. And we can only do so much. Child-proof caps, educating the customer and stuff like that. But whenever they walk out that door, they're going to have to accept some responsibility.
What would happen if a small child found mom and dad's box of cherry Nicorette and decided to eat every piece in the box? I mean, it's no different.
Yeah, well, I
Well,
have
even-
10 grandchildren, and let me tell you, they can get into anything.
Absolutely they can.
No matter what you're watching. But you said you're not opposed to
No, not at all.
child cabs. More questions, please.
Okay. So I heard two competing points. Somebody said, I think it was you, Sean, you said there were 4 ingredients in every e-cigarette, or something to that effect.
So there should be.
There should be. Okay, so you said there was no standardization.
That's what we're trying to work on.
And that's what you're pushing for. Are the ingredients that are currently in them, are they labeled like other food products, drug products?
Right now, there's no set standards, but most stores that I know of, we have ingredients on our labels stating propylene glycol, vegetable glycerin, U.S. sweet drink flavoring, and nicotine.
Okay, and so they're not like, and your chemicals aren't in aqueous solvent, they're in some kind of organic solvent, propylene glycol, I guess.
It sounds like propylene glycol is the carrier medium for.
It's just like in a nebulizer, propylene glycol is used to transport the albuterol, the steroid, to the lungs because it's a good delivery vehicle. Same process.
And with cigarettes, it's not necessarily like acute that you immediately get adverse health effects. Have there been any like long-term studies on the use of these? Because they haven't been out that long.
They haven't been out that long. I mean, you're looking at 7 to 10 years, but the projection on long-term effects is showing more and more in the favor of e-cigarettes. But and it's just one of those things that we've got to sit and watch. But they're taking all of the data that we know right now and trying to project that forward, and it's definitely looking, a lot more in favor of e-cigarettes.
Again, I'll reiterate, Mike, I want to qualify what I'm about to say by first acknowledging that they're very much safely combustible cigarettes. There's no question of that. But the fact is that nobody knows yet the long-term effects of inhaling propylene glycol deep into your lungs. Nobody knows. And some of these particles, like you refer to the aerosol particles, are very, very small, so they can get very deep in the lungs. You really just don't know, So propylene glycol is an FDA-approved food additive, and it's used in all sorts of products. It's used in smoke machines and all those things that people talk about how it's not water vapor, though. It's propylene glycol, and those approvals that FDA has given for it are not meant for inhaling it. Several times every day. So We really don't know. And so remember the low tar cigarettes when they came out? Again, it's not a direct correlation. It's low tar cigarettes, so I think that are an entirely different class, but I'm just pointing out that when low tar cigarettes first came out, the way it was the thing, it's going to be safer. And they ended up showing in the long term it wasn't any safer at all. It was all this kind. It was the science ended up showing it wasn't safer. I think that propylene glycol is much safer. There's no question than combustible cigarettes, but we really don't know. Again, so it's kind of hard to say. It's just safe. Do it anywhere you want to for recreational use. Don't worry, everybody. Just go for it. It's not pure air. It's not what you should expect to get when you sit down at a restaurant to have to breathe. Anything but the air in the room. And that's something that Ted Wagner is very strong about. Our middle ground scientist that's points out, no, it's not pure air. It's it's still contaminating the air with substances other than air. And it is, and propylene glycol is recognized by the FDA on the MSDS, Material Safety Data Sheet, and as a throat irritant. It irritates my throat for some reason. I've been into vape shops and I come out for a couple of days afterwards. It's kind of it's no big deal, but I can feel it. I know you've heard other people say that.
Have there been any studies out on the use of the inhalers with the propylene glycol, what the effects were, and how long have people been using inhalers with that as the carrying agent for the opioid?
What,
Do we know that?
You asking me?
Does anybody know?
I'm not sure you're talking about inhalers for.
Yeah,
Yes.
like have there been any
nicotine
studies with that?
inhalers.
I mean, that
No,
was
no, no,
Just general people with asthma.
Black acid
Right,
inhalers.
yeah.
As a suspension agent.
Yeah, what about theatrical fog?
On
Theatrical
what?
fog's been out for a while.
But
Is
I
that,
would-
it's
but I would-
classified as.
Right.
And that would be
I think that has probably been tested like crazy, and you're right, that's probably a point I should have mentioned, it didn't occur to me.